At least in my mantra, failure is better than regret. The two businesses we're talking about both need a distribution muscle.
So what I remember is Belgium's fine chocolate.
If you go back, a few hundred years ago, the first piece of financial engineering, we don't even call it financial engineering anymore, was actually the birth of a common stock.
Tell us, how was your placements at IIM Indore? What was that experience like?
First time, you're doing education in India for the longest time, you see, the whole concept of education is you keep writing long answers. The classic path of get an MBA, work in an IB shop for 2 to 3 years or M&A shop, and then move to a buy side. We see a lot of opportunity in India of businesses that are trying to solve real problems.
Why did he quit CA and do the IP MAT? Was it like CA was too difficult?
He's Belgium's 40 under 40. Welcome everyone. I am very happy to introduce you guys to Kapil. He's Belgium's 40 under 40. So what I remember is Belgium's fine chocolate. So for him to be 40 under 40, there must be something fine about him. So in the next hour or so, we'll find out what's fine about him. A brief introduction. So this guy works as a private equity investor in Belgium's largest investment firm. It's called INCOR. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kapil.
Incofin. So it's largest impact investor.
Largest impact investor, Incofin. Before that, he worked at JP Morgan and he graduated from IIM Indore in 2016. And he went to IIM Indore on a 5-year integrated program. He's our first guest on the show who went on a 5-year integrated program, a 3-year bachelor's and a 2 years MBA. And he entered IIM Indore in 2011 and then he graduated. And I'm hoping that at the end of this podcast, we will have some great takeaways for our entrepreneurs who watch this show, for our middle-level managers who watch this show, and for students trying to get into IIMs. So let's start with our biggest target audience, the biggest group who has been watching this show, Kapil, the entrepreneurs. We recently had the IMF director. IMF has 24 directors in the world and is one of them. So it's like pretty high position. And he was also the chief economic advisor in the Modi's government, Subbu. And Subbu was telling us that the Indian economy will go from $4 trillion today in GDP to around 55 trillion in the next 40, 50 years. And as this huge growth happens, it will only happen when there'll be interesting people like you coming and telling us what is impact investing, how can entrepreneurs in India make their first crore doing impact investing or doing private equity, because it will require a lot of entrepreneurial talent. And I think India has a culture of jugaad, right? We are a country of jugaad. There's a lot of entrepreneurial talent, but it's not directed because we don't have the knowledge which is in minds of guys like Miglani, you, me, which is being shared widely, the best practices, the best opportunities that are being shared widely. So let's start with that. Tell us a little bit more about what is impact investing, what is private equity, and if an entrepreneur in India wanted to be part of India's growth story, wanted to be part of India going from a $4 trillion economy to a $55 trillion economy, how can they use the knowledge or the takeaways that they get from this impact investing private equity industry to become part of this growth story? So that's our first segment, Kapil. So tell us more. For someone who doesn't know, what is impact investing? What's private equity?
Thanks, Viks. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Impact investing is very simple. Impact investing is making money while doing good, right? So the whole idea is that you do not just want financial returns on your investments, as every investor does, but at the same time, you also want to make a better society, contribute to a better society. Now, whether that happens in terms of serving the bottom of the pyramid, whether that happens in terms of having some kind of social outcomes or economic outcomes or environmental outcomes, so that's the idea of impact investing. And I think every good investor needs to be a student of history. So I'm actually just going to take you back a little bit to talk about the history of financial engineering, talk about a history of private equity and venture capital, because we hear so many of these loose terms, this bootstrap, Series A, Series B, Series D, and very often we don't usually understand what this means. At least I did not until a few years ago, right? So if you go back, a few hundred years ago, the first piece of financial engineering, we don't even call it financial engineering anymore, was actually the birth of a common stock, which happened back in 1600s when the Dutch East India Company issued common stock for the first time to get general public to buy into the company to finance its operations, right? Because before that, you could not do that. You either had to go to banks or to high net worth individuals to raise financing. For the first time, they found a way to go to the common public. If you come back to the history of venture capital and private equity, although we talk about venture capital and private equity in the same breath today, this wasn't the case. So the venture capital movement started in 1950s in the US, where with the semiconductor industry, where some investors found that this is up and growing area, and what they could do is they could actually hand the growth. So if a business would take, say, 20 years to get to a first million, can you make that process faster? And how could you do that? You would give them capital to go out, really kill all the competition or innovate at a pace that's never been seen before, and grow that business very, very fast. So that happened in the 50s and 60s, and then that's how the venture capital industry came to be. Private equity industry, on the other hand, had a different origin story. What they saw was, close to, I would say, more in the 70s, is they saw that there were companies that were built, say, 70 years ago or 100 years ago, massive companies now. But, usually in general financial terms, we say that the sum is greater than its parts. But they saw that the sum was actually less than its parts. So they thought if they could come in and restructure the company and sell it into its pieces, they could actually make more money. Or they would come in and restructure the company, make it more operationally efficient and make more money. So that was VC, it was PE. And then throughout, I would say, during the dot-com bubble, so in the 90s, what happened is you got companies which are venture capital backed, and they want to increase their size, they want to increase their marketability. So what they would do at that point is they would look for more capital, and they wouldn't want to go to the public markets at that point. Public markets regulated, you don't know, you still don't have enough, you're not making enough money that will be valued. So that's when the bridge of, private equity growth capital came in. And that's when it became the full spectrum of from venture capital to private equity growth to private equity buyout. Coming back to your question on the opportunity in India, I think what we're seeing in India currently is an opportunity that's never been seen before. I think we're really living in a time which is once in a lifetime. It's a golden opportunity. It's a ticket that some of us have won in terms of lottery of when we were born and which India we were born in. And people often talk about the demographic dividend of India. I'm usually not the biggest believer in demographic dividend because India has that demographic dividend for a long time. So you look at the last 75 years, India has always been a young country. So what has changed? There are a few things that have changed fundamentally. One, I think, is a young Indian today is very different from a young Indian even 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I think a young Indian today is a lot more confident. And maybe, you are talking to so many young people. You'll see that, there's no fear.
Yes.
There's no fear at all. You go out, you talk to someone on an equal footing. And that really helps. So, you can see that I'm an avid watcher of cricket. So you can see that in the Indian cricket team today versus, the Indian cricket team even 20, 25 years ago. So it's one thing. Second is capital coming into India. So the longest time, India has been a capital-starved market. Right? We've not had much foreign direct investment. We hear of terms like unicorns and soonicorns, but India's first unicorn was actually less than 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're talking about 100 unicorns. So it's not a very old story. It's a very young story. And that's driven by the fact that there's a lot of capital coming into the country. And third is that entrepreneurial spirit. And that again comes from the fact that for the longest time in India, people wanted to do jobs. Right? Okay, and I'll say this in Hindi, but sarkari naukri, IAS kar lo, right? Multinational mein naukri lag gayi. That used to be the big thing in India throughout 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Doing, I know from people that it would be impossible to get married if you're a guy who has a business in the 90s. You wouldn't get someone to get married to you.
Yes.
But today it's a completely different story. People want ESOPs. The fact that you're seeing this on things like Shark Tank, for example, that people are talking about entrepreneurship in general parallel.
Yes.
How interesting this space has become.
Yes. So very well said, Kapil. I think a lot of our audience don't understand the difference between the venture capital and the private equity. So so you explained it very well. That venture capital is for this new startups which want more money to take risk, and private equity is to restructure existing companies, because with age, any company becomes adds some fat to the body. It's about coming in, cutting the fat, making it more lean and more performant. And in this middle space, we have this private equity growth capital, which is like, okay, you're not a startup anymore. You're a reasonably sized company, but you could still grow faster with money. So you've already proven the product market fit, but you can grow faster with money, and that's the private equity growth capital. So very well explained. And I also go ahead.
I'm going to just add Viks here. I think the easiest way to understand is that venture capital takes concept risks and private equity growth capital takes execution risks. That's the easiest way to understand. Your concept is proven, and now we are taking a bet whether your team will be able to execute this or not. At the venture stage, even the concept is not proven.
I'll probably add one thing, that at venture capital, there is a huge execution risk, but you don't have any execution history. You don't know whether anyone will be able to execute because the concept is also unproven. But that is why the product market fit, that is why when VCs say, and I've been doing this for more than a decade, when VCs say, oh, we pay close attention to the team, we are backing the team. The real truth between the lines is you have nothing else to believe in at that point. You can only say, okay, if this guy has done something else before in life and I like him after my 5 or 10 meetings, then yeah, probably the concept is all right. Probably he'll be able to he or she will be able to do it. But there is a huge execution risk in venture capital, and which is where the team importance comes in.
Yeah. So, Kapil, we also agree with you that the young India is much more confident India. I think I stopped watching cricket when Indians, the team wasn't just confident. Like they would win, they would lose a game that anybody would have won with just a little bit of confidence. You could see, and the young Indian cricket players are just so much more confident, and we're seeing that in our youngsters. So we agree there too. And now you say that we are living through once in a lifetime opportunity. So where is that opportunity? Where can a young entrepreneur or a young businessman, how does the next big venture capital firm get created in India? Or how does the next big private equity firm gets created in India?
I think I would say the next big venture capital or private equity firm in India is highly local. Right? I think what we've seen over the last sort of, and again, if you look at the journey of Indian startups, the first set of Indian startups were copy a product that's been built in the West for the Indian market. Right? So you saw the likes of Flipkart, which is Amazon for India. So Ola, which is Amazon for Uber. So that's the first set of startups. The second sort of startups were startups which were building in India and building for India. And then we saw a lot of edtech startups. We saw a lot of health tech startups. I think what we're going to see now is the third wave of startups, which I think will create some of the biggest businesses, but also the biggest PE and VC firms in India, which are going to be built in India but built for the world. Hey, we don't have those kind of companies in India coming out, at least so much. Why don't we have, say, a Facebook or a Google equivalent? Why do we only see that in the part of the world where you live? Right? That should not be one monopoly. That should very much be also something that comes out from India. And that, I think, is going to really switch, and we're going to see that in the next 15 to 25 years.
Yeah, very well said. Like, people in India are building for the world. So what's the critical factor? Like, what change element needs to happen, or is it just a matter of time?
I think to a large extent it's a matter of timing, because many of the startups need infrastructure to be able to operate, and that infrastructure just sadly came to India very late. Right, the digital infrastructure that we talk about, on which many of these startups are built, just happened to come to India very late. The whole India stack story, where you've got different layers, you've got Aadhaar, and then on top you've got a payment story. So all of that stack has only been around for less than a decade. So we are going to see now that some of those building blocks are in place. I think it's only a matter of time.
Well said. So how does somebody get a job in a private equity firm or a venture capital firm? Like, if somebody wanted to seek out a career in these industries, what's the best way to do it?
So I think the most interesting thing about getting into this industry is that there's no one set path. Right? The classic path of get an MBA, work in an IB shop for 2 to 3 years, or M&A shop, and then move to a buy side. I think is becoming less and less interesting for at least many people who are doing the hiring. I'll maybe tell you something from my own story that might be interesting. Right? I've always been a very, very confused guy, and confusion is not a bad thing. I've always had many interests, and I never knew, what is it that I wanted to do. So I would read up any book, for instance, that would come. Right. So I would read fiction, I'd read non-fiction, I'd read science, I would read math, I'd read tennis, everything. And what that helped me do is eliminate things. Okay, this is something I'm not interested in. This is something I'm not interested in. And that really helps. So while I think if you're looking to do venture capital, you need to have many interests, because you need to be at the forefront of knowing, what's going to be the next big thing, especially if you're doing investing, which is sector agnostic. And that only comes from strong pattern recognition when you have had many interests and you've seen many things. So that's on the VC side of things. And you have to be good with people, because ultimately, as Manish said, you're going to work with people, right? You're betting on people. So you have to have that high degree of emotional intelligence. On the private equity side, you also need to have very solid financial skills. So CFA is good to have, and so is an MBA. So private equity is slightly different from venture capital.
Okay. So you use the word IB, M&A, and buy side. And a lot of our viewers will not understand IB, M&A, and buy side. Can you explain that, please?
Yes, IB is investment banking, where you go, you help a company either raise capital from capital markets, or you help them find, say, a buyer for acquisition, which is also mergers and acquisition, or M&A. And in any sort of transaction, there are two sides. There's a sell side, which is selling the business, and the buy side, which is buying the business. So the buy side is usually a private equity or a venture capital, which is buying the business, and sell side is the company itself mostly.
Okay. This is a good opportunity for us to try and understand. You said that you've always been a very confused kind of a guy. And before the show started, you said you were born in Jodhpur. So maybe we can try and understand what got you to become the Belgium's 40 under 40. So take us through your life journey. And so help us understand, you grew up in Jodhpur until class 12 you were there. What was your family like? How do you get into IIM Indore? And what makes Kapil Kapil?
This is going to be interesting. So I grew up in Jodhpur, in 90s, where in a very traditional sort of family coming from Jodhpur, at home we only spoke Hindi. We never spoke English. English was something we spoke in school. I had no idea until grade 10, what I wanted to do. The whole idea was I wanted to do CA, because everyone in Jodhpur wants to do CA.
Okay.
Why is that, Kapil? Why is that so? Why does everyone in Jodhpur want to do CA?
It's a business community. It's Marwadi business community. Okay. People end up joining their family business more often than not. And CA is a good degree if you want to join your family business. And it's also a very cheap degree. You can stay at home. It's very affordable. It's the preferred option for many people.
Right. But पढ़ाई काफी करनी होती है, right?
पढ़ाई काफी करनी होती है, but IIT जितनी नहीं करनी होती है. So that makes it easier. And 11th and 12th, you're in commerce, so you don't have to go to coaching, and those 2 years are super fun.
So Kapil, तेरे मारवाड़ी आवा क्या? मारवाड़ी में बात करती है? पूरी अच्छे से बात कर. अच्छा, अभी घर जाओ तो माँ बाप जी से मारवाड़ी में बात करें कि हिंदी में बात करें?
कभी मारवाड़ी में बात करूं.
अच्छा.
बाकी तो अब हिंदी में बात करते हैं, but कभी मारवाड़ी में.
Okay, so this is the first introduction of Marwari in this channel. So yeah.
No, we've had a marwadishadi.com introduction also, but we never spoke in Marwari.
Yeah.
So
in 10th, you decided that you don't want to be CA, or that you wanted to be CA?
That's what I wanted to be CA. Okay. I knew I did not want to take science. Science, you have to study a lot. And I'd heard 11, 12, so life is not good. I had many friends, and I was very sure that I wanted to have a good, 2 years of my last 2 years of my schooling. So took commerce. Academically, I would say, touchwood, I was always gifted, so I was doing well academically. But after grade 12, I decided that, I wanted to do something else. So I went to St. Xavier's in Bombay to study economics honors. I went there for 3 months and then I quit. And again, I think that's the second life story, second part of my life story. I think we look at quitting in a very bad light. Quitting is not failure. The number of times I've started things and quit has been quite high, because for me, it's about pivoting, right? If I don't, you have to have the right reason for quitting. If you don't like something, you continue being persistent, then you're not doing justice to yourself. So I quit St. Xavier's. I came back to Jodhpur. I was doing CA and CS, so Chartered Accountancy and the company secretaryship.
This is right after class 10.
Class 12.
It's a class 12.
So class 12, I did 2 or 3 months at St. Xavier's, Bombay. Then I came back.
St. Xavier's, Bombay, जाने के लिए तो you need very high grades, right? Like you have to have above 95, 97% or something.
So I had 95% in class 12, which was good. But then I wasn't enjoying myself at St. Xavier's, Bombay. So I came back. And then I was doing CACS. I also had an All India rank in CS Foundation. CA, I cleared level 2. But then again, when was the time to start the articleship for 3 years? I said, isme to maza nahi aa raha, because, after going through that process for a year, I realized this is not something I want to do. And around that time, good luck for me, IIM Indore was launching this program called Integrated Programming Management. The first batch, and they said, the 3 years are going to be liberal arts. So we're going to study everything from psychology to sociology to dance, drama, stat, math, physics, economics, and 2 years are going to be MBA. And that for me was right up my alley, because I had so many interests. I didn't know, what I wanted to do. So I thought this is a very good program. So I took the exam, and the exam at that point also used to have a general knowledge section. And then we had an interview in Delhi with a panel. And that interview, I remember, went on for, I think, 30-40 minutes. And for majority of it, we were talking about poetry, because poetry used to be one of my interests back then. So we did that, and then I got admitted to the program. And I spent 5 brilliant years at IIM Indore. Did a bunch of things. I was very active in student politics. So as a member of the Students' Activities Council, I ran the literary club, was participating in a whole bunch of competitions. Academically, I would say the first 3 years I was not as focused. I was still doing okay. I was in, I think I ended up with rank 7 or rank 8 in the program. But the last 2 years, I really became very serious. Right? So last 2 years, I'd worked on an internship with Kiranveer Sethi, who is an Ashoka Fellow, and she runs Riverside School and Design for Change, a global NGO in Ahmedabad. So I worked with her, and that in many ways oriented me. I had to take my life a little more seriously. And then I came back and I studied very hard. So I graduated with a gold medal, so top of my class out of IIM Indore. And that really set the path for the next few years of my life.
Tell us, how was your placements at IIM Indore? What was that experience like? Being a gold medalist at IIM Indore, did that make things easier for you?
So yes and no. No, because when I was placed, I did not have the gold medal. So I was the first person from my batch to be placed for a summer internship.
You did have the gold medal, right? You were the topper of your...
At the end of
last 2 years, okay.
Yes. For the full 5 years, but by the end of it.
Okay.
Because the way it works is right after your first term, you have internship interviews. And at that point, you don't even have the result of your first 3 months. Mm-hmm. So at that point, everyone's going in blind. So I had my interview with JP Morgan, and they decided, they thought I was good enough. So they hired me. So I did an internship there, which converted to a job. So I got placed actually within the first 3 months of my MBA. I was in that way, I was a bit lucky.
So within the first 3 months of your 5-year MBA program?
No, so the 2-year MBA program. So the first 3 years were just undergrad.
Okay. So you got placed the first 3 months of a 2-year MBA program?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So you got the summer internship, and when you went into the summer internship, you got the pre-placement offer?
Correct.
Okay.
So I must have done a few things okay. So they decided to give me an offer. So that happened. But I would say the placements at IIMs can be a bit challenging sometimes, because you're also competing with, it's a given that you'll find a job. Right? So I don't think that's a challenge. But why it can be challenging? You're, for the first time in life, often for many people, you are in with a very smart set of people who are very good, sometimes even better. And for me, I'll give you maybe an anecdote. When I walked in to IIM, for my first year undergrad, the very first day I met a few people. I met this girl who had topped class 10th. So all of us were school toppers. She had topped class 10th at an India level. And then I meet this other guy. We get books to, the course is going to start, say, day after tomorrow. The next morning I wake up and he's like, oh yeah, have you read it? I said, no, the course is only going to start in 3 days. He said, yeah, I already read it and I made some notes. So I met this guy. So when you meet people of that caliber, you realize that, boss, you are not the only one. Everyone who's come here has come here from...
What happened to this guy who had read the book before the course started? Because in my experience, none of these guys end up working out in the long
term. He's still a very good friend. Thankfully, he did not graduate with a gold medal. I did. That's what I was talking about. I'll say more about this guy. He's a dear friend.
So let me get this. So you grow up in a middle-class family in Jodhpur, want to be a chartered accountant, go to Bombay, leave in 3 months, come back, do 1 year of articleship, do 1 year of CACS, don't like it, go to IIM Indore. In the first 2 years of your MBA program, that is after 3 years of doing your undergrad, you get accepted into JP Morgan. You end up... So where did you work in JP Morgan? JP Morgan Mumbai or?
So I worked at JP Morgan in Bombay on their corporate, the division was corporate investment banking. And there again, actually, I worked only for I think less than 3 months and I quit. The place was really good. I have highest regard for JP Morgan. I think they're one of the best when it comes to running a shop of that size and that quality. Big hats off, massive respect to them. But again, I realized that wasn't interesting enough for me. I wanted to do something that was more social impact driven. And so I moved to a firm called Dalberg, which is a top tier firm on providing strategy consulting, but purely for social impact. So I joined their Bombay team and the team was less than, I think, 40 people. Less than 40 people. In 2016 is when I joined them.
So I'm very curious. You quit the firm that gave you a PPO. You had like 2 or 3 months of your summer internship. You had the whole second year to think about it. Why did you even join them? It would have been clear in your summer internship, wouldn't it?
It wasn't really. So I'll tell you why. Because of 2 reasons. One, I think when you're young, there is a certain sort of element of prestige that comes with jobs like JP Morgan, which, at the age of 22 years, that prestige meant a lot to me. There's also compensation that comes with jobs like that, which is very interesting and not easy to give up. For me, the switch happened when I did a program for student exchange in France as a French government scholar. And I had also done a rural immersion program, which was a part of our internship, where we went to a district called Mandsaur in India.
And was this your second year MBA or 5th year of IP Mat thing?
So the rural immersion program was in my first year of MBA, and second, the student exchange program was in the second year of my MBA. Now, if you combine both of those experiences, one, I saw really what India was like. I think many of us don't have a sense of the kind of challenges that people face in India. I met women who were still walking 4 or 5 kilometers a day to just get water. And that to me just, there's a switch in my brain that just said, how is that even possible? It's 2015 or 2014. It should not happen. And then when I came here to France, I met many young people and people from all around the world, where in India, there's a lot of competition. You want to do ABC, you want to hit those milestones by a certain age. And then I was seeing, people are a lot more relaxed. But like, okay, I want to pursue my interest. I want to do something that I want to do. So that if you add those 2 elements, I knew I wanted to do something that was in the social impact space. And then I also thought, that whole element of status, etc., is not that relevant. I'm still too young to think about those things. So that's why I'd taken that job, because I'd said yes to them. So I'd started. But when I started, I just realized this is not where my heart is. So I thought quitting early on is good for them. It's good for me, rather than me staying on for long and making it worse for both sides.
So the way I see it then, Kapil, is if I rewind back to 2014, because of whatever had happened 70 years after independence, people didn't get piped water. And that is how you ended up in impact investments. Otherwise, you would have been one more very rich investment banker with either JP Morgan or in a similar field.
Perhaps.
Yeah, so you have to. I think if I were you, I would thank whatever the governments that came before the Jal Jeevan. I think what's it called, the Jal Jeevan Abhiyan, for providing water in every house. I think that's going on.
Jal Jeevan Mission, yes.
Yeah, Jal Jeevan Mission. Yeah, to provide. So yeah, hats off to all the previous governments. Because of you, Kapil is an impact investment and not a very rich investment banker.
That's one way to put it.
Do you mind sharing with us what was your salary out when you graduated from IIM Indore and you reached JP Morgan?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't remember. It was quite good. Must be, I think, 20 lakhs, 25 lakhs, maybe. I don't remember.
And then you moved to Warburg Pincus, right? Which is a large...
No, I moved to Dalberg, which is a...
Dalberg. Okay.
Yes. Which is a very boutique strategy consulting firm focused solely on social impact.
Okay.
So the clients were some of the largest foundations, multilateral institutions like Asian Development Bank, World Bank. I did some work for some governments. So very interesting clients. We're all looking to do social impact with so we did strategies for them.
Okay. And do you mind sharing with us what was your salary once you moved to this company called Dalberg?
Oh, I took a massive pay cut. I can't tell the salary, but I took a massive pay cut.
Okay, so that means something, right? Like you were putting, and how long did you work with Dalberg before you moved to Belgium? Was Belgium your next stop?
No, so I spent 5.5 years in Dalberg. So I joined Dalberg as an associate, and then I grew from an associate to a consultant, then from consultant to senior consultant, then from senior consultant to manager.
Okay.
All within 5 years. So I got I got promoted thrice across 5 years. Did a lot of work for Dalberg in not just India, but in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
So Indonesia, Cambodia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Philippines, and the likes. And the 3-year mark, I moved from Dalberg in Mumbai to Dalberg in London.
Okay.
And then I worked for 2 more years. And then I moved to Belgium in 2021, end of 2021.
And what made you make this next job switch from Dalberg to this new company you're with?
So it was a natural progression. I mean, I'd done consulting is good when you're confused, when you don't know what you want to do, because you're getting a taste of a lot of different sectors, which I did. But after spending 5.5 years, I knew I wanted to do something in the finance and investment space because of my background with a little bit with JP Morgan, some studies in CACS. My MBA majors was finance strategy in some way. So it felt like it was a natural sort of mixture of this to come together. And again, using those financial skills in an area where we're helping create impact and make money at the same time, it just felt like a very natural progression.
Okay. Do you want to share with us some interesting project that you did at Dalberg? Because I think that might be an interesting way. Like, okay, what does a project at Dalberg look like, and what do you go in? How do you solve problems and so on?
Yeah, so happy to. Let me actually talk to you about 2 of my projects. So my very first project at Dalberg was there was a Southeast Asian country that was facing an increased suicide rate among youth, sudden surge. So they came to us and they said, we want to reduce the number of suicides which are happening suddenly. Can you help us? So the first piece when you're doing any kind of strategy is trying to see what exists in the world already, what are the best practices, and how can those best practices be applied to this context. So that was my first project. It was a short sort of 4-week sprint almost. We looked at all of the suicide prevention best practices around the world, what's happening in the US, what's happening in Japan, what's happening in say India or other markets, put them all together as a best practice with a lens of, how this can be applied to the context that this country was in. And that for me was a very satisfying project because it was close to home. I mean, you're seeing young people who are committing suicide and you're helping reduce that. I mean, there's no way to establish the causal link between our study and the reduction that happened later on. But we did see that there was a reduction later on in youth suicide. So it just feels very satisfying, right? Like you've saved lives in some way. Okay. That's one part.
Can you talk about some steps that you recommended to that country?
So one of the most interesting insights for us was that when people think about designing suicide prevention helplines, they often think about phones. So you can pick up the phone and you can call someone. Young people don't like to call. Young people like to text. So one of the big things that came out was we need a text line for suicide prevention for young people, where there is someone, who's texting them, because texting is discreet. People can do it while, they're on dinner tables, and young people just don't have phones anymore. They like to text. And the country did end up creating a suicide prevention text line in their country.
That's very good. Can you share the name of this country with us?
No.
Okay.
It is a very politically sensitive project.
Okay. And how does a country reach out to an organization like Dalberg? Right? Is it like some administrative officer in the country says, look, this is a problem we are facing and we need to find a consulting company? How does that happen?
So in this specific case, it wasn't the country itself. It was a large foundation which was working in the country that reached out to us. We've done significant work with them in the past, so they reached out to us. But when you're specifically working with governments, it's usually through a tender process.
Okay. Yeah, you wanted to talk about another case that you worked on at Dalberg.
The other example was India's Swachh Bharat mission, where they said there's going to be every household will have a toilet. So we worked with the Asian Development Bank. They had a fairly large pocket, a few $100 million, that they wanted to use to support building of the toilets in India. Now, Asian Development Bank is not a grant-giving organization. So they won't just give you money to build a toilet. Right? So they are an investment body. They wanted to give money to banks, which would then give money to people to actually build toilets. There are many people who don't have between 12 to 25,000 rupees, which it takes to actually build a toilet. They don't have that kind of money upfront to build that toilet, because the government will perhaps give you the money back, but you have to put it upfront. Or sometimes, you build a toilet which is considered a toilet under the previous scheme, but now no longer operates, so you still need money. So there's a massive market for these things out there. And we did a long sort of series of engagements with them. The first engagement was trying to figure out what the product should look like, right? So what should be the amount of the product? So we decided was 12 to 25,000 rupees. What should be the interest rate of the product? What should be the tenor of the product? So first was the product strategy. The second engagement we did with them was trying to figure out where this should be rolled out. So within India as a large country, so we identified a hotspot of 100 districts in the country where this should be rolled out. The third we did for them was a go-to-market strategy. It's trying to figure out, okay, now this is all good. We have a product, we know where we want to operate, but now how do we bring people together? And in that process, we identified there are a few microfinance institutions who were already doing interesting stuff in this space. We said, that's the best way to partner. So that was again very interesting, and we saw a lot more money actually flow into a product called sanitation loans or toilet loans, as we call it.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. So you can actually build a toilet in India for 12 to 25,000.
Yeah,
like around. It's phenomenal. Okay,
toilet, not a bathroom, just a toilet.
Sure.
And then it's a business proposition. So it's not grant funded. So the banks who are loaning money out are also making money out of. They're charging an interest.
Yeah, very good, very good. Can you talk about a little bit about your work at in your Belgium company? What kind of investing are you doing? What does work look like, and so on?
Sure. So Incofin is an asset manager with $1.4 billion in assets under management. Okay. We do only private market investing. So what private market investing means is that we don't look at companies that are operating, that are listed in the public markets. We work in non-listed companies, and we give them debt and we give them equity. As an organization, we focus on three sectors. There's financial inclusion, there is agri-food, and then there's drinking water. And across those three, we provide debt or equity to businesses. The whole idea is that through our investments, these companies to which we give money should be able to serve the bottom of the pyramid. So I'll give you maybe two examples. We have a fund in India called India Progress Fund, which is a 600 crore rupee fund. It's now almost fully deployed. And in that fund, we target financial services and agri-food companies. And there again, with the agri-food, the idea is that farmers should get a better price and customers should get better quality of food. And there should be general social impact around things like gender, around things like climate, and so on. On the financial inclusion side, we target microfinance institutions or banks, which are usually targeting bottom of the pyramid populations.
So, Kapil, in terms of agri-food in India, and as you know, I'm also interested in this sector, healthy food, and especially low cost, just so it reaches everyone from an impact perspective, and definitely not UPF. So what do you think, as an investor, as an ex-consultant, what are your personal 3 biggest recommendations for anyone in this sector, whether it is as an investment proposition or whether it is for structural reforms?
That's a tough one for me to answer.
Anything on top of your mind as an expert in the sector doing agri, what do you think either that you wish it would happen, or now that it has happened or not happened, how can one benefit from it?
Can we skip this part, because agri is not something that I personally focus on. I focus a lot on drinking water. I'm happy to answer on drinking water, but agri is not something I personally focus on.
Okay. So in terms of water, what kind of investments have you made in India? What kind of sectors or water is a sector, right?
Yes.
So within water, how do you split out like different types of companies and subsectors?
So we have a fund called Water Access Acceleration Fund that invests in Africa and in Asia. We've made an investment in India. It's a company called Right Water Systems, and it's a drinking water fund. So what this company does is partners mostly with the government to actually build decentralized water purification systems in rural parts of the country. Right? So if, say, you've got a village where 200, 400, 600 homes, and you want to provide them with water. Sometimes it's either piped water network, or sometimes it's a water decentralized infrastructure point where people come in and people get water. So this company builds that. So that's a very interesting business that we are in. I'm currently...
Sorry, they build that. Who do they sell it to? Who buys this? Is it state governments, local governments, or is it like consumers?
So they would build it for the government. Could be state or central.
Okay.
And then people would go to those water points and people would get water, and the government takes care of charging the people.
And so this will be pure water. This will not be like the biggest problem in India, as you, I'm sure, 100% know more than me, is water causes not just, water is the biggest problem, because people either don't get water near to them, or if they do get water, in the cities I know, and even in the small towns, it's like people have water purifiers.
Yes.
But not everyone can afford those. And therefore, there is a health risk, there is a productivity risk for the economy in general, and so on, that people just fall sick. And then there is obviously mortality risk.
Absolutely. There's a massive risk, and India is one example. I mean, the total number of people globally who don't have access to clean and affordable and safe and affordable drinking water is actually 2 billion. So it's 1 in 4 people who don't have that kind of access, which is a mind-boggling statistic if you think about it, because water is essential to everyday life.
Yes.
And it's not just people not having affordable sort of people not just having water purifiers, but also people don't have electricity. Right? Most water purifiers need running electricity.
Yes.
You need running water. You don't have running water at home, right? So the oldest trick in the business was, you filter the water, you boil the water, you drink the water.
Yes.
But then people don't even have fuel very often, right? Which is another problem. So it's a massive, massive challenge.
And you mentioned water purifiers. I'll tell you my personal opinion. I've done very light research, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I think the biggest scam, or not a scam, but the biggest problem with water in India is everyone in the cities has these RO purifiers. And the amount of water wastage that happens in that, I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm pretty sure that the amount purified is very small percentage of the actual water that is being used in it. And I don't know why it isn't illegal. If I were in the government, I would ban it like tomorrow or yesterday.
I agree. I think it's a massive challenge, and especially with the kind of water quality improvements that have happened in India. Right? So because I look at the Africa market and the Asia market together, you will see there's a very interesting thing, by the way, that I noticed when I was in the Africa market. In the Indian market, you see people having these ROs or these electricity focused water purifiers. You don't find them very much, say, in the Eastern African market when I was looking. So I went and I asked, what is the reason why are people not buying? Because people still buy jerrycans. Like a jerrycan is more expensive because, it's a reckoning expense. If you put something, it's much less expensive over the lifetime.
Yes.
And there are two reasons. First reason is, of course, lack of skilled labor to come in and because these things require maintenance annually.
Yes.
And that's the challenge. But the bigger challenge is actually the quality of input of the water. In many of the sort of rural parts of Kenya, for example, the quality of input water is just not good enough, which means that a water purifier that requires maintenance once in a year in India will require maintenance at least 4 times a year in Kenya.
Got it.
So India actually, in terms of water quality at the municipal level, over the last sort of 25 to 30 years, India has actually done very well. India has done very well compared to where it was. We still need water purification.
Yeah.
But just to tell you, India has come quite far in that story.
Right. And so what do you think is the way forward then? Where do you see your investments in India and other places in the next 3 to 5 years?
So as a firm, we invest in 3 kinds of businesses. There's safe water enterprises, which we see a lot in Africa. There's someone who has almost, dukaan of sorts. You go out and you buy water. So that's one. Second is decentralized water infrastructure, the example I gave you of Bright Water. And third is water technology. And water technology can be both hardware and software. I think one big opportunity we are seeing also in the market is around PFAS. PFAS is those forever chemicals.
Yeah.
If you have them in the water, it's just almost impossible to remove them out of water.
Yes.
I think that's going to become a big thing again, also in the emerging markets. It's not just about pathogens and bacteria and totally dissolved solids. It's also going to be PFAS eventually.
Yes.
So is Incopen a non-profit? Is it a for-profit?
We are very much a for-profit. We are an asset manager. We raise capital like any other private equity, private debt shop, and we invest and we give returns to our limited partners.
Very interesting. So it is possible to generate returns doing projects like impact investing projects like this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for some of your audience, I would say there's a book called the legendary book by C.K. Prahlad, who also, by the way, was I think the first batch of IIM Ahmedabad and gold medalist. A book called Wealth at the Bottom of the Pyramid, which is a study almost of sorts. I would highly recommend people to read that. So this whole concept of you cannot make money while doing positive things is a misnomer. We think you can. Yeah, there are certain fields in which you can't do it, which is well established, well understood. But in the fields and the sectors where we operate, I mean, we are looking at making money while creating good.
Yeah. I keep that almost like as a Bible for impact investing, and I do it. But it's nice that you mentioned C.K. Prahlad as an IIM alumni, because we like to invite every notable IIM alumni or the future notables. And I think our channel started about 12 or 14 years too late to be able to invite him. Otherwise, I would have loved to have him as a guest on our channel.
He's a he was a legend. I mean, he still is the guru.
Yes. That BOP concept, I think that is used everywhere now, and in different degrees of seriousness or checking boxes. But it is probably the most seminal work in impact investing, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. So Kapil, so you mentioned 3 sectors or subsectors or impact areas within water. Now, coming back to our first topic of discussion. where can Indian entrepreneurs, if there is a fresh MBA graduate or even without an MBA, what should they start up where, in your analysis as a consultant and as an existing investor, where you would like to put money but you're not seeing opportunities in India?
I would say that we see a lot of opportunity in India of businesses that are trying to solve real problems built by entrepreneurs who have found a product market fit, who are serving their community or serving their target group very well. The challenge we see very often is that many of these businesses continue to remain subscale. And so I don't think it's the what problem as much as it is the how problem. Because businesses in India, India is not a country, India is a continent. So what strategy might work, say, in Rajasthan, or even in a part of Rajasthan, we're not working in another part of Rajasthan, let alone, for the same strategy we work in Tamil Nadu.
Right.
So I think that is the operations of a business, figuring that out, I think is a big challenge for many entrepreneurs.
So you're saying if any entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs are listening this, I hear you saying, Kapil, that pick up your state where you have the most experience, maybe where you grew up or maybe you're currently working or something that you see, I'm going to make a mark, and then solve a real world problem. And if you solve a real world problem in the strategy that state or that geography needs, then there is not just money to be made, but a huge impact to be created. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, the number of people India has is 1.5 billion, right? I mean, people often talk, when private equity investors are talking about it, they say that the Indian market is only the top 80 to 100 million people, because those are the people who can pay. And that's one way to segment, but I don't think that's true. The next sort of 500 or 600 or 700 million are as much a market, right? They're still buying things, they're still consuming. They may not be consuming at the same pace, but what they lack in, say, spending, they make up with the number.
I think my favorite example is Reliance Jio 5 or 8 years ago. Totally showed this, that forget the amounts. We will just go so deep and give it so cheap that everyone will use it, and then we'll be the richest telecom company ever, probably. Very soon.
Absolutely. I mean, Zudio. Look at Zudio from Tata's, right? The Trent company. They're not doing any marketing. They're super cheap. I mean, and look at their growth of their revenue. Look at the growth of their profits. It's massive, because they know that India likes things which are decent quality and which are cheap. So if someone's able to do that, I mean, you're looking at a massive market opportunity there.
So coming back to water, where do you think, which states you think there is opportunity and there is also some problems? I'm sure every state will have some problems and opportunity, but in your ABC analysis, which are the states where it balances out, where people could focus on?
So I don't think there's a definitive answer to that, because exactly as you said, I mean, there's several problems in all of the states. There's a massive opportunity on the water side across all of the country.
But I don't know the Marwari lingo. Maybe Viks can help us. But वो धंधो क्या करना है ये बताओ.
Wherever, मतलब I think India में तो आप कहीं पे भी धंधा कर सकते हो. अगर आपको पानी का धंधा करना है, you can do it anywhere. It's a massive problem, especially in rural India. Of course, some states, and the easiest way to look at it is
सबसे बड़ा पानी का धंधा तो water tanker वाला है. ठीक है, that has been there, and that is run by mafias, that is run by goons and criminals, and with support of politicians. वो तो सबसे बड़ा है.
Which is exactly what we don't want to do, right? Which is exactly against what we want to do.
So actually, tell me, wouldn't someone who is actually solving that need, don't they face a problem because you're cutting into these water tanker goons business?
I mean, there is a real problem. I mean, the problems around mafia or the problems around even corruption are very real. And I mean, we take care in our due diligence throughout to make sure that we're not supporting businesses so we have a very thorough due diligence process. We don't just look at the commercials of a business, but we also look at the ENS of the business, which is environmental and social. So we look at a whole lot of things.
Well, you mentioned Judio, and thank you for mentioning this brand. I did not know about that this brand existed, and you said that they're doing really well. And I also see that they've been started by Tata. We recently had a TAS graduate, Tata Administrative Services graduate, an IIM Calcutta guy come to the show. He talked about Tata and so on. And this looks great. It's like affordable fashion, right? Now, why did it require, what I'm interested to know is, why did it require someone like Tata to bring this? Like, why couldn't a smaller company innovate? Why couldn't a startup innovate and create Judio? Why did it require a company like Tata to bring Judio to India?
Super interesting question. I think it's a business of scale. So it's the kind of business that needs to that only does well if it works at scale. Yeah, because you cannot provide the price point that you're looking for unless you're operating at a scale like someone like a Tata.
Right. So very well said. Very well said. In fact, I'll compare this to the Geo thing. I mean, only Ambani or a few others like Tata's or someone else could have done a Geo. You cannot do that scale if you are a local entrepreneur. It's just not possible. You can solve local problems, but you can't do that scale.
But and here's the other thing, right? Which I think I tie back to the very first conversation we were having, which is now imagine if someone walks into a VC shop and says, I want to create India's biggest next fashion brand, which is for affordable fashion. How many VCs would even give a second meeting to this person?
Very few. And I'll tell you why. And I think as I introspect, every time I refuse an entrepreneur, I also think, okay, what would have made me do it? And since we were talking initially of people, the biggest thing is, does that person have a track record? Because how do you judge the future except for the past? No one has a crystal ball. And the best gauge of the future is the past. And if, as VCs, if no one has ever done it before, or even something similar, because it is so innovative, because it is going to be path-breaking, then how do you judge someone? Now, however, so I'll say this. So if, let's say, since we were using Zodio and Geo as similar examples, if like the head of business or the head of sales of Reliance Jio, head of distribution of Reliance Jio came to me as a VC and said, okay, now I want to do this business at scale. Forget me. I mean, people will be falling all over. But I'm sure Ambani will protect him and he won't be looking out for jobs like that. Exactly. That's the whole thing. I mean, corporates protect people who have broken those barriers. They will protect them. It's a problem. I see that as a challenge as a VC. And while I don't actively go out poaching people from who have achieved, because firstly, who has the time and energy to do all that? The main thing is I would love people like that with a track record saying, okay, now I'm going to do my startup because I've done this here before in a similar, not identical space.
Correct.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that I was in India recently and I got a Reliance Jio SIM, great service, so low cost prices. And here I'm seeing that in a quarter they made around 5,000 crores. So that means in a year it's around 20,000 crores, which comes around $2.5 billion in net profit, which is quite impressive, right? Like how many companies in the world can talk about $2.5 billion in net profits, which is...
In fact, I'll go one way forward. I think this is nothing compared to what they will make in another 2 or 5 years.
Sure, because
because of the price. I mean, these are like when monopolies throw people out of business and reduce the competition. It's not the ideal situation, but that is what big investment in large-scale markets have the possibility to do, to make it duopolies or oligopolies or whatever. Yeah. It may not end up being a monopoly, but it's like, it's whether it is Google and Amazon and in the big tech in the US, once you make a scale, then everyone goes towards that. And I think telecom is one of those sectors where you generally need huge investments, firstly. But more than that, to do something like a Geo, compared to all those who were there at the time. I mean, some of them are already out of business, right, Kapil? You were there in India.
Several of them.
Vodafone was there.
Yeah, Vodafone, Airtel. I mean, Airtel is the only one who was come out.
Docomo.
Idea sold out. Yeah, everyone sold out, just merged because there was no other option.
Yeah,
there was no other option. I mean, generally, it's a competitive sector with thin margins, especially in India, because everyone is trying to capture volume instead of value. And thirdly, when you are now having a player who has like so much money that they are willing to forego short-term profit and just make the market, and then that will pay back. Now, here's the thing. They're not making other people go out of business, is my opinion. They're basically saying that I'm going to give you, here's my analysis of Geo. It's not the penetration. It's like they gave data away for dirt cheap prices. India has the lowest data prices compared to anywhere else in the world.
Yes.
Any other major country. I don't know if some island somewhere has lower data.
It is the lowest. It's the lowest in the world.
Yeah. And they're saying, you know what? I've put my infrastructure. For me, there is incremental cost of data is nothing. Take it.
Correct.
Take it. Just take my phone and keep paying me monthly. It is the biggest utility play, in my opinion.
It's the biggest subscription service.
And I think that's the same thing for I'm forgetting the name, the Tata, Zobio, yeah. My question actually, coming back to you, Kapil, since you know the company, I haven't, I just heard of it right now. Do you think low-cost fashion is the same as sustainable fashion? And I'm asking you this because you're in that industry, and we've got a prime example. The big example is Zara, not my daughter, but the brand. I mean, a lot of these fast fashion, low-cost fashion, people have been blamed for reducing the sustainability and the reusage because people are just throwing away things. It's so cheap. Do you think this has a problem because of that?
100%. It's a massive, massive issue. I mean, if you just Google, things like clothes being burned, extra garments on the shores of Chile or some Latin American countries, you'll see that there's just massive glut of products that are not sold, and then they have to be burned. So in climate change or pollution, water pollution, garments is actually one of the biggest contributors.
And given the textiles nowadays have so much of petroleum products, this goes into your forever chemicals problem that you were mentioning.
Yes.
So what's the solution? Going back to water. I mean, we're going a full circle because everything is so interrelated nowadays.
It's so,
And impact is at the core of it. But if you try one impact, you're trying, okay, let's make it cheap and affordable. And doing that, some other impact parameter gets moved.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I think I've really got to the heart of the problem. It's a really tough one. The thing is, when people say, I run a climate fund or I run a gender fund or a certain fund, the whole point of this is things are so interconnected. I used to teach a course called Problem Solving 101 to undergrads at IIM Indore. And I would teach them everything about problem solving that we learn at a consulting firm. So how do you draw an issue tree? What's a hypothesis-based approach and everything? I would teach that for 7 sessions. In the 8th session, I would come and I would say, everything that I've told you, all good, but let's put a systems lens to this. Why are we isolating problems? And I think that's the biggest challenge in the world today, which is that we're not taking a systems lens to things. You asked me a very simple question. What's the solution to this? The solution is, if you go back, say 50 years ago or say 70 years ago, how many pairs of clothes your grandfathers or great-grandfathers had?
Yeah.
Did they have, 17 shirts and like 25 trousers? Perhaps not.
Absolutely. At a personal level, I can tell you, I still have t-shirts, and not this one. This is probably just about 7 or 8 years old. But a lot of my t-shirts, I can tell you, or shirts for that matter, are about 20 years old. They're in good condition.
And you are in good condition that you're still wearing them. That's a
Exactly.
nice brand.
Despite every time, and we recently moved, despite my wife telling me, you have to throw this away. Despite my sometimes friends in humor saying, boss, you were wearing this on that day, which was before my wedding, and now I've got a college going kid. Like, yeah. Is it torn? I don't wear torn clothes.
Correct.
Is it torn? Is it dilapidated?
I find it very interesting that both two big success stories that we talked about came from already billion-dollar companies in India that did not come from startups.
Yeah.
What I see happening in the US is that the success stories we end up talking about is usually small companies that have become big, but it's not the conglomerates who have added one more arm to their organization. But in India, both Judio and Reliance Jio seems like large conglomerates who are willing to reach to the 101 million to the 700 million, that's 600 million part of the population, and they were willing to keep investing till they got these people buying their products.
Migs, I think there are 3 reasons to this. 2 of them are differences between India and US. Both of them are the volume versus value plays that people look at. And the third reason being, because of, especially where you live, the ecosystem, which has been there for 20 years, India is only now developing in the last 5 or 7 years, I think, in a proper way. It has been there with bits and pieces before. The investment ecosystem, with the billion-dollar valuations, the unicorns and the decacorns and the whatever other cons, that is the same type of capital investment that a Reliance or a Tata can make. But in India, you don't have an investor, usually. But there is a Flipkart. There is also a Flipkart. There are a few others upcoming. Soon, I think we will have... and in fact, let me point out this last thing from something I read recently. I don't remember the exact number, but I think India has more unicorns in the last 3 years than pretty much most countries. I don't know whether it's number 1, but it's like pretty much up there in terms of number of unicorns. So that's coming. I think it's coming. It is just delayed. And Viks, again, out of the first 2 that I was saying, the volume versus value play, there is also another thing. A lot of these startups that became big, what you call big tech right now, they were held by the ZERP era. India never had a ZERP era, thankfully, in a way. There are pros and cons of everything. But those zero interest rate and therefore a lot of cheap money going around, that helps. When India, the lowest interest rate I've ever seen, even in a normal savings account, is like 5%. So there is a cost of capital, and when you have a cost of capital, there is a risk, which the return doesn't always match up, especially without a value play, which the US core market is. So those were my 3 reasons. But I do think this is going to change very fast.
I agree. And I had a fourth one. I think also the type of business that you're looking at. Right? I mean, the 2 businesses we're talking about both need a distribution muscle.
Yeah.
If you want to have a wide impact, if you want to get the number of customers you want. And that needs a physical distribution muscle. And that distribution muscle, actually, unfortunately, there are only a few companies that have cracked that. One is that whole FMCG segment, Unilevers and Procter & Gamble's and the likes. I mean, you can go up to, on top of Himalayas and still find someone making a Maggie, for instance.
That said, Kapil, 20 years ago, I used to be part of that thing. In fact, there was a time 20 odd years ago when I used to head rural distribution for one of the top distributed FMCG companies. And I still know, even for them, even for those big MNCs or Indian distribution companies, it doesn't work that way. So if वहाँ पे ऊपर Maggie मिल रहा है, it's not because Nestle salesman is going there or Nestle has a distributor there. It's because they are coming down to the foothills to buy from the wholesaler.
Correct.
there is still, despite that, because it is still not, it does not return the capital for they can't make margins to send your Nestle van to sell the Maggie there.
So guys, I had a hard stop at 11:45, but I found it so interesting that I kept continuing. Please continue the conversation with Meglani. And very nice meeting with you, Kapil. And thank you for educating me a lot about impact investing, P venture capital, P growth capital. Very good meeting with you. And I'm sure we'll meet in person sometime.
And Kapil, I think we've covered most of these things.
Yeah.
There's like just a few questions in my head, which would be not just for me, but mainly for our viewers. So let's go back to my first question. You went to St. Xavier's, Mumbai. Right? We've discussed all the impact investing, all the serious stuff. But I want to understand Kapil as a person. And it's not that far long ago. I mean, at least when I see it from my perspective, 10 साल पहले तो था, or something like that. 12-15 साल पहले.
Correct.
That was around the time when I personally got into impact investing. So my sense of time is structured based on that. You decided that you're going to leave St. Xavier's. So was it after you heard about IPMAT, or was it before that you had left and then you somehow came to know about IPMAT?
Long before. I mean, I did a year in between where I was doing chartered account, CA and CS.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is that curiosity is the fuel of a well-lived life. And life is short, and if you are living life, doing things that you don't enjoy doing, at some point you will regret. Right? And I think, at least in my mantra, failure is better than regret. So
I think on that, Kapil, I have to add this.
Yeah.
I think you will be a better VC than a PE guy. And the reason I've said this is because I spent many years in PE, in buyouts and so on. In PE, it's very difficult to take losses.
Correct.
Even if the upside is not that huge, you cannot have a write-off. Very difficult. I mean, it has to be a very unique model for you to be able to do that. So you keep going and trying to make whatever out of it. In VC, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
If something doesn't work, 2 months, 3 months, chuck it. It's in the bin. And I think any entrepreneurs, wannabe entrepreneurs, for you, I will say, if you do not perform what you promised to the VC, you will be out of favor and no one's going to pay any attention to you, and it might be a write-off for the VC, which can be good from a perspective, which is that. But as a VC, that's how the world operates, that if this doesn't work out, I'm not going to waste my time, my sleep, my whatever. I'm going to make the next investment and try to make that work out rather than spend money over something that's maybe not given. And maybe 3 months is too short. Maybe, yeah, sure. Different VCs have different approaches, but no one puts good money after bad. That's for sure. So I think, sorry, I interrupted, but I think your approach is very much VC-like than a PE buyout or growth investor.
I don't know that for sure, but I know that in life, I really like to do things that give me joy. And joy is very important in life. So if you're doing things that give you joy, I think that's a well-lived life. That's the kind of life I want to live. So, I mean, I pivoted very quickly. I realized, Jimmy Wong was not for me. St. Xavier's was not for me. So I quit, did something else. Realized, I spent a year, realized that wasn't for me. Did something else. And yeah, third time got lucky. It worked out very well. And that's how I think to many of the sort of younger, goes back to our thing of conversation around the young Indians today. What's different? I think that's the key piece which is different. Right? People are not doing things simply because they're accepted by the society or that's the general norm. People are doing things because that's what genuinely interests them.
And I love that. I love that change that has happened compared to not just when you did your thing, because it was still, in my opinion, it had already started changing by then. But if you went back to the 90s when I joined the IIMs, and we've had guests on this channel. Even today we sometimes do, but it's less in that sense, where if you ask someone, why did you go to an IIM? The typical answer was, I had no clue. In my third year, everyone was preparing for CAT or GMAT, so I also did it. Right?
Yeah.
You ask someone in 10th, it's like, why did you take science or engineering? That was the only thing to do. I know, and see, even for you, you came from a particular type of family. If I had, in whatever era, if I had said, "Ki boss, I'm not taking 11th mein science," you'll be like, "Kya ho gaya? Khela ho gaya?" You have to at least take science, maybe engineering, maybe doctor, or maybe at least science to le lo.
I think I do acknowledge very much the privilege I come from. I mean, in the way that the fact that I left a job that was paying well to go to a job that requires you to take a pay cut, and my parents didn't say anything about it. Or I quit Xavier's and I came back and they didn't say anything about it. Or I quit CA and then did something else. So all of that, I think there's a massive case of privilege that I come from. And I understand.
Why did you quit CA and do the IP MAT? Was it like CA was too difficult?
Yeah, difficult to nahi thi itni. I think I got an all India rank in CS. CA I cleared in my first attempt the second level. But I just wasn't having fun. When I went through the first level, I had real good time preparing for it. I thought it was a fun course. I loved accounting. I loved financial management. But when you when you come to level 2, then you see, you also have to do audit and assurance. And taxation was. I was saying this is not something I enjoy doing. That just did not come naturally to me. And IIM on the other hand was super fun because the first time, you're doing education in India for the longest time, you see the whole concept of education is you keep writing long answers. Okay? Quick question, you write a very long answer and the teacher will give you good marks. First time I came to IIM and I'm seeing case studies, and then I'll see that professors will often give you a box. They say, here's the box. Anything written outside of this box will not be evaluated. Then you learn how to communicate, how to be sharp, how to be succinct, how do you cut through the noise and come to the critical issue, and which is what actually works in real life. I mean, if you're working with top people, you can't go out and keep telling them stories. They don't have time. What are the 3 bullet points? You get 2 minutes with someone senior enough, especially in consulting where I was working before. You get 2 or 3 minutes with someone senior to explain your issue, and that's about it. So those are kind of things that you learn at IIM, which I thought was just fantastic. And because I got access to all of these different things from some of my favorite courses, I'm a very analytical guy, but I loved the courses in behavioral psychology, for example, or behavioral economics. Because that to me was just, oh my God, we're not that citrus pedibus doesn't exist. We're not all rational beings because we're not.
Yeah. And then you're absolutely right. Just coming back, so your how big was your class size in your graduation, and how big was it in your last 2 years?
So we were 120 in the first 3 years. So pretty good size. We knew everyone. The batch was quite close to each other. Then there was 450 new people who came in through the postgraduate program, and 120 of us. So then there were 8 sections created, which had, I would say, 55.
So IIM Indore takes 450 people in a batch.
Postgraduate.
So we have 570.
Wow.
Total graduation.
Wow, that must be one of the biggest programs. I know technically right now all the MBA, PGP programs at IIM Bangalore is the largest, but this seems to be even bigger than IIM Ahmedabad and Calcutta.
Yes.
MBAs.
Yes. So that was true. We were quite a big batch. And then we were mixed into sections. So what happened then was each section would have 50-55 of these new PGP students and 15-20 of our students.
Right.
And that was, again, you were completely in a new setting with these people who have never met, people who have done undergrad somewhere else. And what a great dynamic to have in a batch in terms of diversity, in terms of quality of ideas that came out.
Yes. And so obviously your 120 people were with zero work ex post graduation.
Yeah.
What was the profile of the other 450 was at the time? Because now it's only increasing. It'll keep going up till it starts coming down back. as the US MBAs have shown us. But what was your batch, the 450 people? Were they typically 1 or 2 years work ex, or were there a large contingent of 5-year work ex kind of people?
No, so I think the average work ex was a little less than 2 years.
Okay.
We had many freshers. If my memory serves me right, close to half the batch or a little more was actually without any work experience. And for the rest, I mean, there was varying degrees, but I don't know many people who had more than 4 years of work ex. Still 1.8, 1.9 was the average work ex.
Right.
Yeah.
But and your contingent, the IP MAD 5-year contingent, was the 0 work ex.
All 0 work ex.
Yes. So tell me, how does it work with so many people who have come with even 1-year work ex? And when you now think about it, life आपको पहले 6 महीने क्या पहले 3 महीने में सिखा देती है कि boss, now I'm into a non-protected environment.
Correct.
So in fact, I feel that I went with 0 work ex.
Yes.
In my MBA, or my first MBA, because then I did 8 years of work ex and then did one more MBA, but that apart. When I went with 0 work ex, a lot of people in our batch, and this was 25 years ago, was 1-year work ex. So we still had a lot of 0 work ex people like me, probably 40% of the batch, a lot of 1 to 2 year work ex people, which was the majority, and probably another 40 or 50% people. And then they were like, उस time पे बोलते थे बुड्ढे लोग.
हाँ.
Anyone with more than 3-year work ex were like, you know.
Correct.
And I mean, as hilarious as that sounds today to me,
yes,
the way I saw it is anyone who's worked for a year or 6 months in a company, in a like actually gone out, he has actually seen more life than I have seen in the last 21 years of my life. Just in those 6 months. Because I only realized that very late. But that is how that difference is. Did you feel a difference with people with the 1-year work ex, 2-year work ex?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's pros and cons. The big difference was they were a lot more mature than many of us. It's just a given. They approach things with a very different, the kind of things that would worry us, for example, worry me at that point in time. Many of those things are not a big deal, right? It's the big deal. Like, no, it's not. And now it makes sense. It wasn't a big deal. So I think that was a big thing. But I'd say there's one big con to doing to coming to people who came with that kind of work ex. And that in my mind was they often had preconceived notions about things. कि भाई मैं तो 6 महीने या साल भर मैं काम करके आया हूँ. I've seen this. So this theory that's being taught, for example, is not a right theory. But sometimes when you're learning things, you have to learn with a very clean slate.
Yeah.
You have to think about application later. Don't start thinking about application already when something is being taught. Right? That was a big advantage for some of us, actually. Very clean slate.
Very true. I think that's a lovely point that you brought out, that experience is not always better. Sometimes it gets baggage with it.
Yeah.
That's true. And the other point that I had, Kapil, when you were talking about moving from consulting to investing. So before you moved, you were already in the UK. So tell me a bit about why you were thinking consulting to investing. I know it's always sexy to be on the buy side as an investor versus a consultant. But were you planning it, or did it happen out of the blue?
So I knew that I wanted to do something in impact investing.
But you were an impact consultant. And you were helping a lot more people as a consultant.
I mean, debatable. I mean, the kind of investments we make also help a lot of people. Right? So these are mass market businesses.
Right.
So I don't think a number of people had anything to do with it. But I'd been there for 5 years and I was having a really good time. But I knew that I wanted to do something which is at the intersection of finance and impact. And so either I could specialize to do, I mean, if you're on a partner track in any consulting firm, which thankfully I was, and I made a manager. And so when you're a manager, you're on a partner track. So I then decided I want to do something on the advisory or consulting side, but in the finance or investment side. or I actually want to go deep and make investments. And to me, the latter was just a better option because I was still young. When I quit my job at Dalberg, I said, if I continue on this path, I'll become a partner. But I haven't tried again other things in my life. So to me, it just sounded exciting to do something that was different from what I'd done over the last 5 years. I don't think it's because it was sexy or because it's more prestige. I think that is far beyond. Wohi karna hota, I would have still been at JP Morgan. And I mean, that would have been a lot more prestigious. But for me, there's a big difference between consulting and investing. Is that consulting gives you breadth, investing gives you depth. And I've done a lot of breadth before this. So every case is different, you're working with different. But now there's a sector that I'm looking at, for example. And then once you invested money, I mean, you have to go through that journey. And I was ready in my life to take that kind of punt, but I wanted to spend a few years going deep into our industry.
Yeah. And I appreciate all of those points because I went through many years ago as an ex-consultant who moved into private equity. So some of them I can resonate with, which brings me to the last question of curiosity in your journey, which is your consulting to investing made you London to Belgium. And while probably at that time, I don't know, which year was that? 21. Okay, so that was way past Brexit.
Yes.
Way past Brexit. So why were you open to it? And what were the pros and cons as you saw it, apart from the career move into investing?
One, it's okay. So interest was one, of course. I wanted to do something with a lot more depth, as I mentioned before. That was one. Second, I think I was also in some ways, there's a very popular saying, which is if you want to retire at peak. Like, don't wait for the fall to come and then you leave. I was really enjoying my time in consulting, but I could see it if I spent 3-4 more years, I don't think I'd enjoy it as much. So I wanted to quit at the peak because now I have very happy memories of the work that I did. Very glad that I did it and very glad that it was in my past. And Incofin also seemed to be the right place. I'd spoken to them and they seemed genuinely impactful. I had spoken to some partners at Dalberg who had worked at Incofin and they had a very good impression. It all seemed like the right kind of organization for me. Yeah.
But that's about the company, that's about the sector.
Yeah.
I'm very interested about geography. Because you're moving to a non-English speaking country, to Belgium.
Yes.
And not just non-English speaking country, it's like a very tiny country, at least the way I see it. We are in a small country from where both of us come from, comparatively.
Yes.
England is like a 1/20th of an Indian population. And when people say, when I first came here, it was peak summers, August, in Oxford Circus, which was chock-a-block.
Yeah.
And the person I was with, who was taking me around on my first or second day in England, said, this is like completely full. There's no place to breathe. And my first response was, रात को 1 बजे दादर स्टेशन पे से ज़्यादा लोग मिल जाएंगे. Because that was the transition I was making. Of course, now it's been a long time, so I can also see what they meant. So in that sense, I mean, Belgium is probably even smaller, less dense, in my opinion, than a London, at least.
Half the population of Bombay.
Yeah, probably. So Dadar and Bandra station combined.
Likely. Yeah, likely.
Yeah. And non-English speaking country, a completely different continent after Brexit. So how did you overcome those obstacles and what were the positives that you saw at that time when you evaluated?
So I think that's a very interesting question. I think in general, my risk appetite is high. If I compare myself to, say, other people, I mean, the kind of decisions I've made in the past, I'm usually I take calculated risks. I won't take, a risk that's not calculated. But it's usually high. Like I knew when I was coming here, I don't speak the language. I don't know many people. It's going to be tough. But, again, if I don't do it now, when will I do it? If I was to do it, at 40 years of age, I'm not going to move suddenly to a country where they don't even speak the language. And here, I can still move, I can still learn. Here's a company which has offered me an interesting job. The company is interesting, the place is interesting. I came here and I started something called Impact for Breakfast, which is an impact community. I started doing a whole lot of things in the sector here, which also helped me get to the Belgium 40 under 40. So all of that, because I thought it was an interesting space. It's a country which is still not as well developed in terms of the impact investing ecosystem. So there's a lot to do, a lot to build. So that I thought was just interesting. And second, my wife was in Belgium. So it also made sense for us to...
So now you come to the point, right? Now you come to the real point as a sub-note.
She could have also moved to Belgium. She could have also moved to London. So we were open to both the ideas. And we when we started thinking about it, the idea was that she would move to London. Because it's English-speaking market, much easier for her to move than for me to move here. But if I don't do it now, when else will I do it?
No, I think it all makes sense. It all makes sense, especially your last point that your wife was already there, so someone had to move. And that's why. So it does answer some of my questions. I'll go back to Vik's introduction about you. And he was thinking about chocolates. And to be very honest, मैंने Belgium chocolates पता नहीं US में बिकती हैं नहीं बिकती. मैं तो Swiss chocolate सुनी थी, French chocolate सुनी थी. Belgian probably भी हैं. I'm not taking anything away. But the first thing that comes to my mind are the beers of Belgium. So, are you a beer drinker?
We were talking to someone who was a teetotaler. I never touched alcohol, so no. But I can tell you about chocolates. Hand on heart, I think Belgium has better chocolates than Switzerland. I know some people...
Everyone is biased. While you're a teetotaler, I am like a near teetotaler on chocolates. So I don't eat chocolates or sweets, except if someone forces, then I do take a bite or something, but I'm not like a chocolate or a dessert eater at all. I used to be about a decade ago, but then I decided too much sugar, too much processed sugar, and can't do it anymore. If you want longevity, which is the fund, and we'll discuss that separately at some point. The longevity fund that I'm doing right now.
No wonder your t-shirts are still fitting you, huh?
This is actually a stretchy t-shirt. So if I get fat, it'll stretch like that. If I get thin, it'll just like just a t-shirt and I'm probably going to edit this part out. But yeah, I just came back from the gym. I've not had a shower, in full honesty, yet. I just went to this podcast, and then now is my time to have a shower and then go for dinner.
Good, I'll let you go then. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Kapil. Thank you. We've had a couple of false starts, maybe one mainly. So thank you for coming on our episode and for sharing your history, your career path, your educational and family background. But most importantly, I think some of our viewers are going to love your segmentation of the industry. They're going to understand how to get into the IIMs, whether it's a 5-year program or a 2-year program. And I think that's how we want to, as a channel, keep helping people. We've got experts like you who are willing to give up 2-3 hours of their time, not just when they are on the channel, but also discuss with us and share text messages and take time out of their family life, take time out of their professional life. And I wish and I hope and I expect that every one of these viewers are going to learn something out of it, even if it is a 5-minute out of this 1 or 1.5 hour episode that we are going to publish. So yeah, thank you. And thanks for coming once again. Good night. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And see you soon in London.
Perfect.